The American Civil War transcended a mere North-South rivalry. It echoed across the Atlantic, capturing the attention of Europe's dominant empires. Consider for a moment the implications had the Confederacy emerged victorious. What if Britain or France had intervened, altering the course of history? Yet they refrained from action. Europe observed as the Confederacy crumbled, driven not by moral grounds or justice, but by calculated self-interest. This narrative unveils how Europe's motivations influenced their involvement, or lack thereof, in America's most devastating conflict. This tale encompasses power dynamics, economic risks, and ethical posturing. Britain and France assessed their choices based on potential gains or losses rather than moral considerations, ultimately sealing the Confederacy's fate. Why did Europe permit the Confederacy's downfall? Was it a fear of conflict, the appeal of Union trade, or the optics of endorsing a slave-holding state? The answers lie within a complex web of diplomacy, economics, and strategy that illustrates how self-interest not only shaped the Civil War, but also impacted global history. Before we delve deeper, please like and subscribe to our channel to support our community. The Confederacy's dependence on King Cotton as a diplomatic tool was pivotal for its leadership during the Civil War. Confederate leaders believed their cotton supremacy would compel Britain and France to recognize their sovereignty and intervene militarily. This approach, termed cotton diplomacy, stemmed from the conviction that Southern cotton was vital to European economies, especially Britain's textile sector. However, this strategy ultimately faltered, leaving the Confederacy economically vulnerable and diplomatically isolated. At the onset of the Civil War, cotton served as the foundation of the Southern economy and was integral to global commerce. By 1860, the South produced two-thirds of the world's cotton supply and accounted for over 75% of all cotton in international markets. This dominance was crucial for Britain, where the textile industry employed more than 600,000 workers directly and supported nearly 4 million indirectly, about 1/6 of England's populace. Cotton textiles represented Britain's largest export category, constituting nearly 40% of total exports. Southern leaders recognized this dependency and believed their control over cotton production granted them significant economic leverage globally. Confederate President Jefferson Davis and his advisors were confident in this strategy's potential. The belief that Britain and France could not afford to lose access to Southern cotton drove Confederate leaders to implement an informal embargo on cotton exports, anticipating that it would cause economic turmoil in Europe. This turmoil, they hoped, would compel these nations to intervene diplomatically or militarily against the Union's blockade of Confederate ports. This strategy, initiated in 1861, became a cornerstone of Confederate tactics. Southern leaders even resorted to burning cotton stockpiles and limiting production, convinced that such actions would showcase their economic power and prompt European governments to act. Initially, the strategy appeared effective as the Union's naval blockade, combined with the embargo, severely disrupted Britain's cotton supply. By August 1861, American cotton imports to Britain plummeted from 80% of its total supply to nearly zero. Mills in Lancashire and Cheshire began shutting down due to raw material shortages, leading to widespread unemployment and poverty among textile workers. By mid-1862, half of Britain's textile workforce was jobless, with many families facing starvation. France faced similar challenges as textile manufacturers in cities like Rouen and Lille struggled with dwindling cotton imports. French merchants urged Emperor Napoleon III to recognize the Confederacy and pressure the Union to lift its blockade. Delegations from both Britain and France appealed for intervention, emphasizing the need for access to American cotton for economic stability. However, neither nation took decisive action in favor of the Confederacy due to several factors that undermined King Cotton diplomacy. Both nations had anticipated potential supply disruptions and built reserves before the war. In 1860 alone, British merchants stockpiled over 1 million bales of American cotton, cushioning the initial impact of the embargo. Additionally, Britain and France quickly sought alternative cotton sources from their colonies. India and Egypt emerged as significant suppliers during this period. Although these regions could not fully replace American cotton in quality or quantity, they provided enough raw material to prevent complete economic collapse in Europe. By 1863, Indian cotton accounted for nearly half of Britain's imports. Domestic political considerations also influenced European responses to King Cotton diplomacy. In Britain, public opinion was shaped by abolitionist movements that had outlawed slavery throughout the empire decades earlier. Supporting a slave-holding confederacy would have been politically untenable for Prime Minister Lord Palmerston's government, especially after President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1862, framing the Civil War as a moral struggle against slavery. In France, Napoleon III faced similar challenges, although initially sympathetic to Confederate overtures due to aspirations for expanding French influence in North America through intervention in Mexico. He ultimately refrained from recognizing the Confederacy due to domestic opposition from liberals who viewed slavery as incompatible with modern civilization. The failure of King Cotton diplomacy exposed significant weaknesses within the Confederate economy. By withholding cotton exports, Southern leaders jeopardized their financial stability at a time when they desperately needed revenue for their war effort. Cotton had accounted for over half of all U.S. exports before the war and served as a primary income source for Southern states. The self-imposed embargo effectively severed this lifeline while failing to achieve its diplomatic goals. Moreover, Union military strategies exacerbated these economic challenges. Lincoln's naval blockade drastically limited Confederate access to international markets, reducing Southern cotton exports from 3.8 million bales in 1860 to virtually nothing by 1862. The blockade not only halted exports but also disrupted essential imports like weapons and food supplies, further weakening the Confederacy's war capabilities. By late 1862, it was evident that King Cotton diplomacy had failed. Neither Britain nor France was willing to risk war with the Union over Southern cotton access, especially as alternative sources became more viable and public sentiment increasingly opposed intervention on behalf of a slaveholding regime. Acknowledging this failure, Confederate leaders altered their tactics by attempting blockades and selling limited quantities of cotton directly to European markets in exchange for weapons and supplies. However, these efforts were insufficient to reverse the economic stagnation or diplomatic isolation caused by earlier miscalculations. In retrospect, King Cotton diplomacy was a bold yet flawed strategy that overestimated Europe's reliance on Southern cotton while underestimating its adaptability. The South's leaders believed their control over global cotton production granted them unmatched leverage. However, this belief proved disastrous. Instead of garnering European support for their cause, they found themselves increasingly isolated as both Britain and France opted for neutrality over involvement in America's brutal conflict. Ultimately, King Cotton failed not due to a lack of economic significance, but because it underestimated Europe's resilience and adaptability while ignoring the growing moral opposition to slavery that rendered support for the Confederacy politically untenable for European powers. Economic pragmatism played a crucial role in Europe's decision to maintain neutrality during the American Civil War. While some British and French elites sympathized with the Confederacy due to shared aristocratic values or economic ties, the broader reality of trade interdependence made neutrality the safer choice. For Britain and France, sustaining robust economic ties with the Union outweighed any potential benefits from supporting the Confederacy. Public opinion significantly influenced European reluctance to intervene on behalf of the Confederacy during the Civil War. While governments considered potential economic advantages of recognizing the Confederacy, moral implications of supporting a slave-holding nation proved insurmountable. The rising strength of abolitionist movements alongside the Union's strategic use of emancipation ensured that public sentiment in Europe overwhelmingly favored neutrality or support for the Union. In Britain, abolitionism had deep roots in public consciousness. Victories led by figures like William Wilberforce had outlawed slavery throughout the 18th century British Empire by 1833. These achievements reshaped British identity by mid-19th century. Many viewed their nation as a moral leader against slavery globally. Supporting a confederacy reliant on enslaved labor would have been perceived as a betrayal of these principles. The abolitionist movement mobilized diverse coalitions. Religious groups like Quakers and Methodists played prominent roles in sustaining anti-slavery sentiment through mass petitions and boycotts against goods produced by enslaved labor. By 1862, this moral opposition had become so widespread that overt support for the Confederacy would have incited public outrage across Britain. The American Civil War transcended domestic conflict. It had international implications that could draw foreign powers into its violent arena. For Britain and France, intervention was not entirely off the table. However, risks associated with such actions ultimately outweighed potential benefits. Strategic caution, driven by fears of escalation, influenced Europe's decision for neutrality. This caution was evident during incidents like the Trent Affair, which highlighted fragile relations between neutrality and intervention. One notable moment occurred in November 1861 during the Trent Affair, when Union warship USS San Jacinto intercepted British mail packet RMS Trent in international waters. Aboard were two Confederate envoys en route to Europe, seeking recognition for their cause. Captain Charles Wilkes ordered their arrest, claiming they were contraband of war. This action provoked outrage from Britain, which viewed it as a violation of neutrality. Prime Minister Lord Palmerston demanded an apology from America, along with release of Mason and Slidell, while preparing military responses, including troop deployments to Canada. Tensions escalated rapidly with both nations nearing war. However, Lincoln recognized gravity behind situation facing an already strained Union. He emphasized desire for one conflict at a time. After tense negotiations, Lincoln agreed upon releasing envoys, allowing both sides save face without admitting wrongdoing. The Trent Affair underscored precarious Anglo-American relations during Civil War, revealing risks involved should Britain engage further into conflict. While some Parliament members sympathized with Confederacy, majority recognized war could disrupt vital grain imports, threatening Canadian colonies. France faced similar dilemmas. Napoleon III sought expand influence through intervention, yet depended on weakened U.S. His ambitions relied upon internal strife, distracting United States from external conflicts, thereby complicating decisions regarding recognition or support towards Confederates amidst ongoing tensions at home. A Confederate victory would have aligned with Napoleon III's ambitions, yet direct intervention posed the risk of provoking a unified American response post-war. Additionally, Napoleon faced rising threats from Prussia under Otto von Bismarck, making it unwise for France to divert resources to support the Confederacy amid European tensions. By 1863, it became evident that neither Britain nor France would engage militarily in the American conflict without assurances of success, which grew increasingly elusive as Union victories accumulated. But consider the alternative. What if Europe had intervened? If Britain or France had prioritized profit over principle and backed the Confederacy, would slavery have persisted for decades? Would the United States as we know it exist today, Or would history have unfolded differently, resulting in a world where democracy faltered and empires flourished? Europe's choice not to act was not entirely altruistic. It was a gamble with uncertain outcomes. What do you think? Did Europe make the right decision by remaining neutral, or did they miss an opportunity to shape history on their own terms? Share your thoughts in the comments below. History is not just about what occurred, but also about what might have been.